Well, good morning. Welcome to New York for those of you out of the area and to MongoDB world. So it looks like here from our little poll that we have some splaining to do.
Looks that way.
So let's get started here. Let's turn this on. Okay, so we are doing MongoDB and Node.js 0 to hero in 80 minutes. Again, my name's Ken Alger. This is Mike Lynn.
Mike Lynn.
There's our Twitter handles and our respective titles. Francesca did a great job with introducing us, so we don't need to go too much more into that. So a little bit of housekeeping. The Wi-Fi network is MongoDB, and the network password is World 2018 with a capital W. The restrooms, so we're here for till 10:15. So if you need to return some of that coffee that you've had this morning, the bathrooms are out by the escalators that you came up. We have a MongoDB community Slack channel. It's mongo-db.slack.com, and we've set up a specific room in there for this talk. So if you have questions now or later down the road, happy to answer things about Node and MongoDB. So our quest today, we're going to be building an API using Mongo as the backend, Express, Node, and in the mean world, we're not really going to be doing much of the front end stuff, so Angular and React won't really be that big of a deal. But our quest is to build this API, and it's going to be kind of a walkthrough, hands-on tutorial on your guys' part, so you can walk through. We will be giving you a GitHub repository that you can follow along with the code, and it's going to be quick. We got an API to build, 2 APIs, in just over an hour. So we're going to limit you to about 7 minutes per request, which is ambitious, but we know you guys can do that. Right?
Yeah, so we should say the format of the tutorial is we've broken this out into a series of 9 individual quests. Each quest is going to build on the previous one. So try and stay aligned with where we're at on the quest, and like Ken said, we're going to have 6-7 minutes tops per quest. So, you know, the title is 0 to hero. So kind of the idea of a hero is somebody that's heroic and really gung-ho for things. Or here in America, it's also a sandwich. So we're either going to impart on you how to become heroes or turn you more like me into a big fat sandwich. So there's the GitHub link. If you guys could go there, that's where you're going to get started. So Leafy you'll see Leafy here. He's in Seattle, where it's close to where I am. We picked him up in Seattle on my private jet there on my way out here to New York. I wish I had a private jet so I didn't have to listen to the screaming kids. And we're going to send him on a quest for finding great delis in New York. So the tools that we're going to use, MongoDB. First off, we'll start with Mongo, and since you're the MongoDB employee, have at it. Yeah. So who has not worked with MongoDB at all as a backing database? Okay, so a good number of you have. So MongoDB differs from traditional tabular databases in that it is a document database. And when I say document, some people say, oh, wait a minute, Word document or PDF. And while MongoDB can store those binary formats of documents, what I'm really talking about is a JSON document. So let's go a little bit into detail about what that means. Was initially developed and released in 2009. We are just about to release version 4.0. Pretty exciting stuff. Some amazing announcements today at the keynote. When we store data in MongoDB, like I said, we store it in documents. And what I'm representing here is 2 different ways of storing data. One, tabular on the left, where we store individual different types of data in different tables, most likely. That's the natural way you store data in a tabular or a relational database. So I've got people and cars. I'm most likely going to create 2 tables, one for the people data and one for the table or the car data.
Now, there is a relationship that exists between people in their cars, and most likely it's going to be one-to-many if you're lucky. To establish that relationship or represent that relationship in a tabular model, we're going to create another column on one of the tables, and that'll become a foreign key. That will express the relationship between the tables. In MongoDB, since we're using documents and not tables, we still express relationships between different pieces of data, but there's a different way that we do this, and we refer to it as embedding. So with MongoDB, you can either embed the relationship, and in some cases that means you're duplicating data. Yes, relax, relax, it's okay, it's okay. In other cases, we can actually do the same thing that we do in the tabular model, and we can create separate documents, separate collections of documents, and link them together using references. So embedding and referencing are two methods of establishing and representing relationships between distinct types of data in MongoDB. I mentioned MongoDB is a JSON document. I actually lied to you. It's actually a BSON. Who's heard of BSON? Anybody know what BSON is? OK, pretty good coverage there. BSON is a binary representation of JSON. The reason that I like to mention this is because JSON has limited type support. It's pretty much strings and numbers, right? But MongoDB takes it a step further, and we support true data types. So we support decimal, floating point, date types. Why is this important to you as developers? Because it makes it easier to use. When you write data out using MongoDB, the next time you read that back in, you don't have to marshal it from a string to an actual date. You don't have to figure out if the year was at the front or the year at the back. I've been through that. That's a nightmare. Every decision about how you manage your data with MongoDB is made with the developer in mind. So we use BSON to make it easier. Just talking a little bit about, formatting is a little off, but talking a little bit about the types of data types that we support. So string, obviously numeric. Geolocation, we support geolocation natively. Arrays of sub-documents. So you can get pretty fancy. Another cool feature of MongoDB is that it is polymorphic. Multi, morphic shape, multiple shapes. I can have a single collection, maybe it's a product catalog in the retail space, and documents inside that collection can take different shapes. Not every single document, like a row in a table, has to have the exact same number of columns, right? So if you look at a document, there are attributes. These are essentially key value pairs. There can be a different set of key value pairs in each of the documents. This is polymorphism. Why is this important? Back to what I said before. Every decision about how we manage data in MongoDB is made with the developer in mind. We want to make it easier for you. So let's say I create a product catalog. I'm launching my bike business. I'm selling bikes. Bikes pretty much all have the same set of attributes. They've got wheels, they've got sizes, you've got colors, they've got paint color. Now I want to start selling scooters. And that's a different set of attributes. So in my application, I just add those attributes. I don't have to stop the database, issue an alter table. I'm greatly simplifying it, so the relational guys in the room are like wincing. It's not that hard. But this is essentially polymorphism. And then today we're going to use NodeJS. So you're all here because you've heard of NodeJS, but from the survey, a couple of you actually have deployed production applications using NodeJS. The cool thing about NodeJS is it's JavaScript on the server. JavaScript has traditionally been front end, so it's relatively easy to understand. Writing flow, writing logic in JavaScript is relatively easy. So taking that from the front end and using it in the back end is pretty awesome in my experience. The key thing about it, if you're coming to JavaScript and Node.js development from another language, from maybe a strongly typed language or C++ or Java or even Python, the key difference between working in Java and some of those other languages is that it is non-blocking. It is asynchronous. So some weird things can happen. If you think you're writing functional code from top to bottom and you think it's going to execute one line at a time, you may be in for a surprise. So just keeping the fact that JavaScript executes asynchronously in mind as we go through this might help you. We're also going to leverage NPM, the Node Package Manager. There are other package managers out there. Some people will favor Yarn over NPM, but today we're going to we're going to leverage NPM, the Node Package Manager, to manage installation of libraries. This is key because in the past, what we had to do to add functionality to our application, we had to write it. So if I wanted to manipulate images, for example, I would write the code associated with stretching the image or adding a filter. Today, we leverage pre-built libraries. Somebody's done the hard work for us, and we can leverage that using a Node Package Manager and pull that library into our application. We're going to show how that works. Express is one of those libraries. It's a web framework for Node.js. Now, in the past, when I developed applications leveraging Perl, for example, or PHP, I would rely on a separate server package like Apache, for example. People familiar with Apache? In the past, that was the paradigm that I was familiar with, like the LAMP stack, for example, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. We're actually going to incorporate the server into our application, much more intimate experience, and Express is going to manage a good deal of that for us. So it just makes managing data, listening for incoming TCP/IP requests, all of that's greatly simplified leveraging the Express framework and toolkit. Simplifies HTTP. So why the mean and the MERN stack? Some of you may not have heard of mean or MERN, but it's essentially MongoDB, Express.js, AngularJS, and Node.js, the mean stack, or MERN, MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js. So why are we using this? Who has not heard of the mean or the MERN stack? Who has not heard of Node.js? I mean, it's just wildly popular. It's amazing. So the paradigm for development, it's really simple to learn. It's fast to pick up. And you can essentially write an API with a backend in little to no time. So without further ado, we're going to get started with the quests.
So did everybody have a chance to go to that GitHub link? So there's the first quest, which is basically just project initialization and requirements. Get everything set up on your laptops and get started. We'll give you a few minutes here, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Yep. So this is meant to be an interactive session. If you want to follow along, that's great. If not, you can watch your neighbor, watch your partner, but essentially you're going to be installing MongoDB on your laptop so that you can leverage the client utilities. You're going to be installing Express.js, Node.js, and NPM on your laptop so you can begin the process of building an API.
If you have questions throughout the process, we're obviously available to help if you get stuck.
What's the URL
For the slide itself?
Oh, it's for the Slack. Mongo-db.slack. Mongo-db.slack.com.
And we'll pull up our Slack channels right now.
There you go. We should switch over to the GitHub. Maybe show it. Maybe pull that up.
Request one, right?
To make it smaller.
Maybe a little smaller.
All right, so if you're following along, you're hopefully installing MongoDB on your laptop. Anybody stuck, you can throw a question into the Slack or raise your hand and ask it. We'll gladly help. Anybody not able to get to the GitHub repository, there's additional instructions at that repo. I'll post it in the Slack channel.
Isn't technology great when it works?
Right? All right, so 9:00.
Just a couple more minutes.
All right. Sure. I'm gonna So github.com/Ken, WALGER.
And then MDBW18. Go off to present. Yeah. So everybody get that? How are we doing on everything?
I'm gonna take them through the installation. On installing MongoDB? No?
Takes a long time. Internet's slow.
Yeah.
The URL for the Slack channel.
mongo-db.slack.com.
So we have to go to Launchpad to get it.
We gotta, you can, yeah.
So launchpass.com /mongo-db.
Oh.
I don't. Do you need an invite to that? I thought it was only the advocacy hub that needed the invite.
Yeah, you can create a, oh, you have to have a MongoDB address to get
Is it?
What's the launch pass address?
When-
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. This is not going to buy them anything anyway, so. Yeah, sure. Continue on.
All right, so we'll move on here to the next quest. So quest 2 is all about getting JavaScript set up with just a quick Node.js test. If we come over, oh, come on, browser. Where is? So the other option that you can do if you don't want to get MongoDB set up, if you have an Atlas account, you can use Atlas, which is great, and there's talks about that all day today as well. Seriously.
What's going on?
Okay, so once you get MongoDB and Node set up, you'll want to test just to make sure that Node is working, and then you can write just a real brief Node.js script to print out hello world to the console. You can do that in your favorite text editor, IDE, whatever. So how far did everybody get in the last one? Were they able to get Mongo and Node installed? No? Some yes, some no?
Okay, yeah, it's going to be probably an issue with the Wi-Fi. So it's not going to help, but we did have the requirements to have MongoDB installed. That might be an issue. I guess we keep moving.
So once you would get Mongo and Node, everything installed, test that out. So we'll build the next step, quest 3. Come on. Here we go. Is getting our server set up. Node uses a package.json file, which handles all of the applications, the dependencies for your project. So you would install that with NPM init, and that starts up your Node.js project. When you do NPM init, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions about your project, which license you want.
We'll run through it.
Sure. Let's do it. So that wasn't what I wanted to do at all.
Oh, that's going to be tiny. There we go.
Okay, so let's just make a directory. Oops,
Going back in time.
that was last year. If we do npm init, can everybody see that? We need to make it a little bigger.
A little bigger here.
So package name, we're going to call it heroes. Version 1, description. So the entry point is the entry point for your application. You can use that later on down the road to run it and kick it off. Index is fine. We're not going to be running tests today, so we don't need to do that. Git repository, you can add that in later. Keywords, MongoDB, Node.js, Express. and then it comes back and it will ask you if that's what you want.
So essentially, we're building a manifest for your application. So using NPM, we just initialize the manifest.
Cool. And I lost my browser stuff. You want to talk a little bit, Mike, about?
Sure. So by now, hopefully you're getting MongoDB installed, you're getting Node installed, NPM installed. We've just initialized the package manifest, and we'll continue on with the quest.
Not this one. All right. So we created the server. Next step is handling our requests. Express makes it incredibly easy to handle your HTTP requests. So the post, get, patch, delete, the HTTP methods, which kind of can be referred to the database CRUD operations with create, read, update, and delete. So if we make all of our routes, again, Express makes it really easy. In JavaScript, you'll define a constant. Let's make that a little bit bigger. To require Express, which brings that process in, create a router that's going to handle all of our routing needs. And then we can just define our routes. So our get routes for just the default / the index page. And then we'll be doing delis to get Quest for Heroes. And later on, we'll do post, put, and delete routes as well.
Sorry, Zach. This slash, you say the index page is like GTD default, or the didn't say index like JSP.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
So the home route slash, where does routes to? Default home page?
Yeah, that first one with just the slash is just the default homepage.
Yeah, so we're leveraging Express here. We're pulling in the Express router, and we're using that router to manage incoming requests. The first request we're managing is just the default / route. So we've opened up a session, we're listening for an incoming request, and the Express router is going to listen and respond with the content in that function. So we'll receive as a part of that, via the Express library, we'll receive the request, the response object, and then the next function in the loop. And this is part of the asynchronous nature of JavaScript.
So in this instance, the next, you didn't have anything.
I'm sorry?
Well, we talk about your function.
Yeah.
Request response next. Next, in this case, don't do anything.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
in this particular case.
A null object, yep. So if we were to send a GET request to our application now, if we were to run this, we would simply get a console log message, and we would send a response object, basically a label saying API index.
You guys want to see that built out? Let's just do that. Let me open up my WebStorm here, and we will just
So once that router is in place, though, we can export all those routes, and we can use that over in our index.js, or in this particular example, it was app.js that we set up. So every time that you make a change in your file, you'll have to restart your server. There's a great package called Nodemon that watches for any changes. And so if that is installed, anytime a change is made, it will automatically restart your server for you. And again, that's an NPM thing, and you can install that. And that save dev flag just saves it into your manifest in development mode, so it won't get pushed out into your production server. Let's just create a new project here. Wow, that's tiny. You know what? All right. Oh, jeez. How many times have I done that? 1,000? So the next thing that we would do once we kind of get through that, we want to define our data for our specific application. For here, Leafy is getting hungry, so he's out looking for a hero sandwich here in New York. So here's just a bunch of delis in this general area here in the Times Square area. There's Margon. Mike, you're a lot closer here. I'm from Oregon. Has anybody had any experience with any of these? I just pulled these off of Yelp at some point. Mm-hmm. I've heard really good things about Juniors, but I haven't gone there myself.
Close to the office, too.
Is it?
Yeah.
So, all these are individual MongoDB documents. These are all the same structure in this case, but they wouldn't have to be, right? So you could have some of these documents that don't have a specialty, some that have ingredients you could have full recipes for their menu, the entire menu. All sorts of different things in there. So once the data gets defined, so MongoDB has a node driver. We have a whole bunch of different drivers there's 8 or 9 officially supported ones.
Mm-hmm. Across different languages.
Yeah. So
there's one for NodeJS.
One for NodeJS, but there's Java and Python and a whole bunch of other ones. So you'll want to install with NPM the MongoDB drivers, and then you can create a client. So that's going to just create the connection, right? So that connection class is going to create our connection to our MongoDB database. By default, MongoDB uses port 27017. We're using a database name there.
So that's assuming that you're running MongoDB locally on your local host.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you had Atlas or your own URL or MongoDB address, you could use that up there. And then we would take that data from the last step and just populate our database. So we're requiring our database.js, which was up here. We're
going to require the deli information, and then we're going to do an insert many into our collection, which is just grabbing the JSON data and putting it in there. We had 9 delis. Here, we're just putting in 5. You can run tests to make sure that all that happens, but that's a good production environment sort of thing. MongoDB has this wonderful GUI tool for exploration, and now with some of the features that you'll hear about today, there's a lot of good interactive tools that pretty much turn Compass, what did they say yesterday, into a full user interface package for it. You can start.
Anybody familiar with MongoDB Compass? Okay.
Oh, nice. So after we get that going, so to set up our MongoDB driver itself, we're going to go through and require express. So this is back in our routes.js file, right? So we're setting up our routes. So our post route here, where we would set up to post data to with our API, is just going to take whatever information we're shooting to it and doing an insert one. And then we're going to send a response back that says, here's what was saved. So body parser is another NPM package that allows for the parsing of JSON data into a variety of encoded or encodings. So back off into app.js. We set up our routes, and then we start up our server, which starts listening on our port. 3000, I believe, is the default for Express. So there's a great tool for testing APIs called Postman. Has anybody used Postman? Oh, yay for Postman. You can shoot off and test the APIs that way. You want to cover Mongoose at all? So Mongoose is another package. It's an ORM for MongoDB and NodeJS. So this second app here, or second API, will have the full-blown CRUD operations in it. We define a schema a little bit more strictly using Mongoose. We can define exactly what we want, and it just kind of helps to model everything.
In this contradictory, you want to be flexible as adding and manage key value as you want. But if you define a schema, still allow you to do that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so some people are coming to Node.js development with MongoDB with a background in schema, very strong, rigid structures delivered via schema. Mongoose kind of helps bridge that gap. So if you want to, in advance, you can set up very strong type definitions about the types of data that you'll be importing and managing with your.
That would be good for relatively stable schema, which
Correct. Yeah, correct. Now you can also define object types in Mongoose. So I can have an attribute that is defined as an object, and it's kind of a get out of jail free card where it can be flexible in the type of data that you put into it. So it can have sub objects. You can have arrays of objects of different types within Mongoose. And a lot of the flexibility and schema definition from Mongoose, we're actually adopting into the MongoDB drivers, some changes coming down in the latest releases of the MongoDB driver that are pretty exciting around that space. So.
You know, and if you think about having the ability to have a flexible schema is great when you're developing and whatnot, but once you get in your app and it's out there publishing, having the ability to let anybody start writing to your database in whatever format they want may not be exactly what you really want. So being able to define, hey, name has to be a string, so that me coming along later on going, oh, I'm going to put a binary thing in here. Well, what does that mean?
So once you have this, do you actually turn on schema validation each time the request comes in?
You have the ability to do that. You can turn on schema validation and reject. Sorry?
It will slow down the speed performance.
Sure, well, yeah. So there'll be a non-zero value associated with the amount of effort required to validate the schema. Sure. Yeah.
So for the full final Mongoose code here, we'll define our exports, and we'll develop a controller that handles all of the specific things that happen at the various routes. So here we have delis. So the post delis, we'll just create a route. We can get a deli with a single ID, update a deli with an ID, or delete a specific deli.
And these roughly correspond to the method calls within the MongoDB native driver. So obviously when you're posting data, you're going to be doing some type of create. So you'll reference the create method. Yeah.
So again, there's the create, created new deli. We're doing very similar to what we did in the previous step with Mongoose, but we're creating those delis that are coming out of the request body. And then you're saving that deli off. So Mongoose, again, has slightly different syntax than just the straight NodeJS driver does. So getting all the delis is pretty easy. Find one, we're just going to grab the restaurant ID that we set up and do a find request on that. We're going to catch an error if that doesn't happen. Updating, oh, there it goes again. Updating the deli is going to be kind of a similar process, but we're using the find one and update. Again, catching the error. Find one and delete. And then our whole new app is going to use Express. So Express has nowadays has a built-in body parser middleware feature to it. So you don't necessarily need to use body parser. You can use Express. You'll find it both ways out there in the world. So I thought it would be kind of neat to see it both ways. So we set up our connection again, bring in our routes, and then we just have Express server listen to it. And all that kind of pretty much follows the model view controller design pattern. So we have your model of your data, your view, which in this case we're not really concerned with, and the controller that's controlling where all those routes go.
Yeah, we kind of blasted through this. Obviously, we had some issues with downloading MongoDB, and we were hoping that you were going to be able to follow along with us. But the repository is certainly there for you. You can feel free to fork that repo and follow along. Join the Slack channel after the fact, and we'll certainly monitor that and hopefully get you up to speed on MongoDB and Node.js.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No worries. Yeah. Any questions?
Questions about Node or mean stack in general? So some of the things, I know there's a talk at 2 o'clock today, I forget which room. There's one room that's dedicated to talking about drivers. There's a talk on the Node driver itself. That's at 2 o'clock. There's some other good talks today on Node itself. And data modeling, 2:35. Another really good resource is MongoDB University. Oh, come on. So they have a specific course that kind of mimics this. Courses are 6 weeks. Ish.
University courses are free. You can follow along for free. They start at a specific time, so they're kind of time boxed, but you can follow along with them. There'll be homework assignments that you'll complete and submit. You can obviously interact with the instructor as well as the other students. And yeah, so the basics for MongoDB, and obviously 101 JS for Node.js.
The last time that I took the Node.js one, you build a mock shopping cart app, which was pretty cool. So I have all the final project code available on my GitHub/getting-mean. So you can get all the code there, see it up and running. Yeah.
So I have a question. I'm doing MongoDB and it's not working. I have to yesterday I was trying it out.
Yeah.
And I have to do MongoDB --decaf user local bar MongoDB in order to run my Mongo instance. Is there an app that's broken with my data store or service?
Yeah, so it depends on what was run previously and the permissions that were set. Sometimes what happens is you establish a Mongo database and maybe you're using a different user.
I was looking at there's a migration problem between 2.4 and 2.6.
Could be a previous version issue.